In an artistic community in Los Angeles, a man narrates that he's always anxious when he's going after something he wants. He feels a need so fierce that he can't stop himself from going after it. The man's name's Marlon. He's a broke chef in Los Angeles, trying to get by in his life. One day, while wandering around the city, he accidentally bumps into a woman and spills coffee on her clothes. The woman is pretty and she looks to be in a hurry. Marlon tries to apologize, but she's angry and frustrated. Her day is not going well and it becomes worse now her clothes are wet. Still, Marlon is persistent and makes a scene for her to accept his help. The woman is embarrassed because Marlon is yelling at the top of his lungs in the middle of the street. To shut him up, she accepts his offer to buy her new clothes. They introduce themselves. Her name's April, and she's well off with a fancy car, very different from Marlon. He takes her to a thrift store and buys her an orange dress that is too big for her body. He also takes her to the laundromat to wash her clothes, all paid for by him. While waiting for the clothes, Marlon opens a bottle of wine and they start drinking. The wine is cheap, and Marlon makes fun of it pretending to be tasting it. After a couple of sips, April starts dancing to the song playing in the laundromat while Marlon watches. The woman is a conundrum. At first glance, she seems strict and serious, but after drinking, she becomes a different person. Her demeanor changes again when her purse falls on the ground, spilling its contents. Marlon helps her gather things and accidentally sees her ID. He's surprised when he sees it's her birthday. He wants to celebrate with her since she doesn't seem to be having a nice day. April is angry when he congratulates her and leaves in a huff after grabbing her clean clothes. Marlon quickly goes after her and insists they have to celebrate. April wonders if he wants to go to a restaurant, but Marlon is broke. He doesn't have a lot of money left with him, which is embarrassing for him. He doesn't mention it to her. Instead, he invites her to his apartment so he can cook a nice birthday meal for her. April is feeling brave and reckless that day, so she accepts it. They grab the train because he has no money for the cab either. It's been a long time since April rode the train, and she finds it interesting. They can watch the city pass by on the train, and it's a nice view. The first stop of the day is at the supermarket. Marlon leaves April outside, and with the rest of his money, he buys some things to cook a meal for her. He really wants to surprise her and make her a little happier through his food. Cooking is something that he loves doing, and he did it professionally for some time before losing his job. He wants to impress April and maybe they can have something more after. Meanwhile, April is outside, people watching. Her phone rings a couple of times, mainly from a man trying to talk to her. It's her husband. He's a famous baseball player, and they have been together for years. April found out that he has been cheating and what's worse, that he impregnated one of his mistresses. She learned all that on her birthday. It's why she looked so lost when she met Marlon. While waiting for him, she watches a couple fighting because the woman is pregnant, and the man doesn't want the baby. It's sad to see the woman almost begging the man to listen to her, to think about what he's doing. It reminds her of her own relationship and how hard she tried to make things work, only for her husband to hurt her deeply. She sympathizes with the woman and they share a cigarette. Marlon arrives sometime later and they walk to his apartment. What he didn't mention to April is that he's drowning in debt and he has no money in his name. He lost his apartment that same day, but thankfully he has a friend there that lends him the keys. The apartment is bare except for a bare mattress and a couple of personal objects. It's so threadbare that April thinks he has recently moved in. To take her mind off the fact he's poor and broke, Marlon pours her some wine and starts cooking. April watches him with a lot of interest. He's a tall man, with broad shoulders and fit. He's also nice and pleasant. She sees him as the perfect rebound one-night stand, and she needs it. Her husband keeps trying to call her and sends hundreds of messages to know where she is. April ignores them all and steps closer to Marlon to watch him cook. As she watches him cooking a recipe she never heard of, he explains how he started cooking. His mother taught him when he was young, and when she passed away, it became a necessity. Now, it's a passion for him and he wishes he had enough money to have his own restaurant. April admires his tenacity and how comfortable he is doing something he loves. She feels special that a stranger took his time to make something for her from scratch. It's more than her husband ever did for her. When they have lunch, April is surprised because the food is delicious. She compliments him and mentions that he should have his restaurant. It would be a success. Marlon surprises her again when he brings a cupcake he bought to celebrate her birthday. It's a heartfelt gesture that makes April really happy. They sing happy birthday and she blows out the candle. Then, they start feeding each other pieces of cake. On a whim, April feels like hugging Marlon, and while they are embracing, her phone rings again. She excuses herself to turn it off and sees it's her husband again. She tells Marlon that it isn't important, just her husband pestering her. Knowing she has a husband is like a bucket of cold water for Marlon. He isn't the kind of person who is going to endorse cheating, and he refuses to be close to April again after he finds out. She gets angry that her husband is ruining things for her again, and that Marlon is jumping to conclusions and judging her. She storms out of the apartment, leaving a confused Marlon behind. The movie flashbacks to a few hours before they met. In a mansion in the suburbs of Los Angeles, April woke up happy because it was her birthday and she was excited to celebrate it with her husband. While she was getting ready to go out, her phone rang and it was a doctor talking about an ultrasound. On the phone call, she learns that not only was her husband cheating on her again, but he also got someone pregnant. Her husband is clueless that she found out, and she doesn't want to confront him with a clouded head. She decides to ride around the city to cool off, and that's how she crosses paths with Marlon. Differently from her, that day he didn't wake up happy. It was his eviction day, and he had nowhere to go. He lost his job at the restaurant he worked at. He had no money anymore, nor prospects for the future. He feels his life is out of his control, and there's nothing he can do to change it. He goes around town, meeting a couple of friends and watching street artists perform. He accidentally bumps into a woman, not knowing that a few moments before, she was having an anxiety crisis. April goes back to Marlon's apartment to grab her purse. Marlon politely offers to take her to her car, since he took her all the way across the city. When they get to the place where her car was parked, the car isn't there anymore. It was towed. April doesn't care. She tells Marlon that her husband can take care of it and that they are going to divorce. It dawns on Marlon that he was too quick to judge her, but April brushes it off. She knows that she would have had the same reaction if it were her. Marlon finally realizes that the reason why she was so sad must have been because of her failing relationship. He decides to help her take her mind off things at least for a day. They go around town again. Marlon calls a friend of his that does tours around Los Angeles and they get a free ride. April sees the city through different eyes and it's enchanting. Marlon helps with his easygoing and excitable energy. She can't stop smiling or laughing the whole time she's with him. They have some drinks after the tour, and she even smokes for the first time. They get closer as time goes by, getting to a point where Marlon blows smoke into her mouth. It's a very relaxing experience for April, and her anger goes away. She invites Marlon to go grab some drinks at a bar, and he bets that he can get free drinks for them. It's a distraction from the fact that he has no money to buy drinks. In the bar, Marlon pretends he's proposing to his longtime girlfriend, and one of the patrons pays for a round of drinks for them. April can't believe that worked, but she has a lot of fun lying to a bunch of strangers. Outside, she has to do some push-ups to pay the bet, much to Marlon's amusement. Her happiness sours a bit when her husband sends a bad message to her and she lashes out at Marlon. He offered her water after they drank so much, so she doesn't get a headache, and she snidely replies that if she wanted water, she would take it. Marlon is confused and hurt by the way she's speaking to him. It wasn't his intention to offend her. To make things worse, she tells him that the reason he's hanging out with her is that he's too afraid of being alone. Marlon gives her a hurt look and goes away. As soon as he turns, April regrets taking her anger out on him. While alone, she listens to her husband's messages and starts crying. She doesn't want to go back home and face him. She's tired and hurt by being played by a person who was supposed to love her. After putting herself together, she goes after Marlon. She sees him talking to two women and thinks he's flirting with them. It isn't like that. One of the women thought she knew him from somewhere and they were trying to figure out where. April approaches and starts talking to Marlon as if he is her husband and they have kids that he's leaving behind to cheat. The women quickly leave and Marlon gets upset. He doesn't understand April. He was being nice to her, respectful and pleasant, and she lashed out. He's clearly upset and April feels bad. She apologizes for her behavior and he accepts it. They continue on their adventure and meet another friend of his. It's a woman, Baby, with her girlfriend. Baby tells Marlon she's sorry for what happened to him, and that catches April's attention. She asks what she's talking about, but Marlon quickly changes the subject. Baby wonders if they want to go on a double date, and they accept. They park the car and start smoking and drinking. April tells Marlon that she knows some people who would be interested in working with him, but it isn't a good time for Marlon. She finds out that her husband is in town and she's sure that he's cheating on her again. She asks if they can follow him and they accept it. It's not hard to find him with another woman. Marlon throws juice at him and the husband gets furious. He can't see who it is, but he feels humiliated. Not only that, but his date also laughs at him. April feels vindicated, and it's all thanks to Marlon. When he points out that her husband is similar to a famous baseball player, April confirms that he is him. Marlon is excited that he played a prank on a famous person, and April finds it funny. When they are alone again, Marlon finally asks if she knows the woman her husband is cheating with. April explains that her husband always cheated and that she always knew. She held on to hope that he would change someday, but the final straw was finding out he got another woman pregnant. They had been trying for a baby for 3 years, and it never worked out. April thought the issue was her, and since her husband has a baby with another woman, it's confirmed. It made her angry and terribly hurt to find out something like that. She wanted a baby, they were planning for it, all for him to go behind her back and betray her. After years of living like that, feeling insecure and lonely, she feels relieved that she has an excuse to break things off for good. After her heartfelt confession, they roam around the city until evening falls. April complains that her feet hurt and Marlon quickly comes up with a solution. He puts her into a shopping cart and starts pushing her to their next destination. April can't believe he's such a nice person, worried about her as if they were long-time lovers. It's fun and unexpected. everything she needed after realizing that her relationship was over. She needed to see that there are still good men around, capable of respecting her as a person. While he's carrying her off, April tells Marlon that she's an environmental scientist. It's a job that she loves doing, and she wonders what Marlon would do if he could do anything in life. He says that he wants to be alive. He cooks as a hobby and pays his expenses, but what he really likes is living. He takes her to other places she has never been to before. The city is awake with bright lights and people roaming around, many doing what they were doing. They go to a park and smoke again. April dances with Marlon, close and intimate, with no song but the sound of their heartbeats. When they return to his apartment, he tells her that he wants to have 5 kids. She says she also wants to have kids, but she doesn't think she's able to. They break into his apartment and have some more wine. April takes pictures of them, and he sees a picture of her when she was younger. She feels self-conscious because she gained weight after getting married. But Marlon thinks she's still beautiful. He's completely honest with her, and it makes April want to kiss him. As they drink and smoke, Marlon finally tells her that when he was younger, still at school, he was arrested. Though he was underage, the arrest was still on his record, and it made it difficult for him to find jobs. In his last job at a restaurant, where he was the main cook, his boss started to get suspicious of him because of his relationship with his wife. He did a background check on Marlon and found out he had been arrested years before. He fires Marlon and starts calling him names when he's trying to leave. When his former boss pushes him, Marlon fights back. The man reports to the police and Marlon is being searched for attracting someone. With his file, he's looking for 2 years in prison. Instead of running from his fate, Marlon decided to face it head-on. He was planning to turn himself in the following day. That's why he decided to spend the day with April. If he was going to be locked up for years, he wanted to have a good time before. Though his story is way off her reality, April offers him a place to stay while he figures things out. Marlon denies it and says that he has to do the right thing. They go back to the city, drinking more and having fun. They go to a tennis court, roll around and sing. Marlon receives a call from a friend of his that is going to give him a ride to the police station. It's a reality check for him, but he decides to put it away for the moment and have fun with April. After the tennis court, April takes Marlon to a place he has never been before. It's the roof of a building that has a nice view of Los Angeles. Marlon is amazed by the beauty of the place, and even more by April. She has a good heart, but she has been hurt a lot. It's similar to Marlon. Ever since he lost his mother, his life is a struggle, but he never lets it take him down. He keeps pushing forward, doing his best. In a moment of quietness and intimacy, April tells Marlon that he's going to do great things someday. She knows it. She starts saying that her husband always was intimate with her in the dark. He didn't feel attracted to her anymore. She's insecure about her body, but for Marlon, there's nothing wrong with her. She's perfect just the way she is. They finally kiss and get intimate. It's amazing and they feel a deep connection between them. It's almost as if they knew each other for years instead of a day. April has the perfect closing for her birthday, and she's more than ready to move on from her husband. Meeting Marlon opened her mind in many ways. She realized that she doesn't need to settle and that she has to experience life more. He made her understand that she's beautiful and special in her own way and that she deserves better than a cheating husband. As for Marlon, he gets the courage from April to face his fears, even though being locked up isn't a nice prospect. The following day, his friend takes him to the station and he turns himself in. Sometime later, he and April exchange letters in which they talk about their respective lives. Marlon became the cook at the prison, and he's exercising a lot to keep his mind busy. He's always thinking about her and confesses that before meeting her, he was thinking about running away. Now he knew he did the right thing, and when he got out, he could move on with his life. Hopefully, he could see him again. April replies that she's happy that he's doing something he loves, even if it's in prison. She's also helping him with lawyers, and they think that his sentence was too large. He can get out in 6 months. She's also officially divorced, and she doesn't have to worry about anyone cheating on her again. April talked to a friend of hers and they are willing to work with Marlon whenever he leaves prison. His dream of having a restaurant was going to come true. What April doesn't mention in her letter is that she's pregnant with his child. When he is released 6 months after being arrested, he appears at her doorstep and is surprised. Her belly is already big and he knows the baby is his. He can barely contain his happiness. He could have never imagined that bumping into a woman and spilling coffee on her clothes would lead him to find the love of his life. April never guessed that the worst day of her life would become the best. Years later, Marlon is a successful chef and resides in a huge house with April and their 2 kids. Life couldn't be better for them, and it all started with spilled coffee and a cheating husband.